any community that we work in, when we go back, I recognize their faces, I know their names, I see their children, I see them, and it's further than just donations and work. There is this peer-to-peer relationship building that's happening that is lifelong, it's generational. And to understand that with education, you are building for the future. And that's what Bitcoin is truly about. We are literally building for the future of humanity when it comes down to it.
Welcome to the Builders in Bitcoin podcast, a podcast about the people who bring Bitcoin to life. I'm your host, Rod, and I go by the handle BitKite on Twitter. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Yusuf Nessary, co-founder and director of the Built with Bitcoin Foundation. Yusuf has now become a dear friend and is on a mission to help communities improve their quality of life, and he's just getting started. In this episode, we dig into Yusuf's background and how he found Bitcoin, how the Built with Bitcoin Foundation is changing lives around the world, the power and importance of relationship building, and a lot more. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you will too. So let's just jump right in. Yusuf, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well. Super blessed, excited to be here at Bitcoin Park. Shout out to you. Shout out to Matt. Shout out to everybody that's a part of this initiative. Super grateful to be here.
Man, we are so grateful, and you nailed it with the word blessed. Blessed to have you, and blessed to be able to host Grassroots Bitcoin over the past 2 days here. The energy, you actually mentioned it right when you sat down. This is your first in-person podcast?
It is.
Yeah, the energy is just different when you're doing a podcast or even talking, obviously, with somebody in person rather than on the phone or a Zoom or a Google Meet. It's just going to be different.
Peer-to-peer, baby. You can't beat it. It's the best feeling.
It really is. It really is. So again, thank you very much for making the trip over here to Nashville, Tennessee, to Bitcoin Park, to attending Grassroots Bitcoin, and actually spending your time and sharing your story. But I don't know if I know that. Where are you from? Like, where'd you grow up?
So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, but I am the proud son of 2 Afghan refugees from Afghanistan. My father came to this country in 1980 during the Russian invasion. And my dad and my mother's stories are extremely sensitive for me. It makes me pretty emotional to talk about the struggles that they went through. All of our parents, to some degree, do everything they possibly can to set up their children's future for success. And education has always been a huge part of that. It's in the fabric of my family, which is why all the type of work that I do, whether it's through the foundation or everyday life, it's putting importance on what education is.
Yeah, man. And I'd love to unpack that because LA, and now you're in
Houston, Texas.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so how did you end up over there?
So Los Angeles, when we were living there, was a very difficult situation. We lived in a very low-income neighborhood, but my parents, created and fostered this atmosphere that wasn't low income. My father always taught me to be hardworking, to never make excuses, and to always support your family. And those types of values he, instilled in myself and my sister, and it reverberates to the work that we do today. So, it's like, don't stop, never stop, because there are so many people that wish and would like to be in the position that you're in, that unfortunately don't have the same circumstance or situation that we're in. And so for me, the work never stops, and I never want it to stop. I love what I do. I have a passion for it, obviously. And so growing up in Los Angeles, in South Central Los Angeles to be exact, it wasn't the most comfortable environment, but it was the environment that made me who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad worked for an airline company, so we were very fortunate to be able to fly for free with flight benefits. So I was able to visit different countries around the world, understand different languages, cultures, food, music. So that really brought my affinity for people. And so when I was in college, I wanted to study sociology and to just understand people better. And in the line of work that we're in, if you don't understand people, then you don't understand what's going on the ground. And so to be a people person per se was something that I wanted to, incorporate in my daily life. And so when we moved to Houston, it was a culture shock.
When was this?
This was when I was about 11 years old.
Okay.
So my sister, who's 5 years older than me, was just starting high school. So you can imagine for a young woman,
Yeah.
leaving her bird's nest, so to speak, was very difficult.
I mean, and also culturally, like Middle Eastern, going from the LA, a bit of a melting pot, to Houston, which is probably not as big of a melting pot as an LA area.
Absolutely. So we lived in a suburb outside of Houston, so it was even less of a melting pot. We were the only individuals that were from our ethnic background at our schools. So it was certainly a culture shock. But again, you have to adapt your environment.
Totally.
And, we were learning about ourselves. We were learning about, the different culture. And this brings a different perspective. You cannot be in the same, live in the same lens for your entire life, because that doesn't allow you to experience what the world has to offer. And my dad, we saw from my dad how he was friends with so many different types of people. All different shapes, sizes, colors, ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds. So me, as a practicing Muslim and a proud Muslim, I never really saw others as indifferent. I never saw them as lesser than or greater than. It was just, we're all equal. But I understood, even in that moment, that not everybody has the same benefit that others do. They're not in the same fortunate circumstance. And how can you evolve within that? And so that's why it was very important to me that when I would go travel to other places around the world, I would see how people were living. And, their happiness was a different definition of my happiness, but
Yep.
yet they were still happy. And going back home to Afghanistan and being able to visit my family there, that's what really taught me, how fortunate I was in my circumstance, but also to understand their perspective and have empathy. And in 2009, my life changed.
What happened?
I went to Africa for the very first time. I traveled to the country of Rwanda through a grant through my undergraduate program.
So real quick, you were undergrad and you're still in school at this time, or no?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So when we were in Houston, I graduated high school from there, and then we moved to the Bay Area when I was around 20, 21 years old. And I went to school at St. Mary's College in Moraga in Northern California, and it was a private Catholic Lasallian school.
Nice.
So again, going off of the theme of understanding different cultures and faiths and different types of people, I found myself even more so going to a private Catholic school than I had ever done before. And that was my first time that I was ever exposed to working in the nonprofit world. So I worked for a program called Jumpstart. It's under the AmeriCorps umbrella, where undergraduate students become certified preschool teachers. And we went into inner city communities, and inner city Oakland is where I worked in. And we taught preschool to children that were between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And this was something rather phenomenal for me because I didn't know about early education, bro. My parents didn't know what preschool was when they first came to this country. And many of the places around our area was all private. So my parents didn't have the funds or the means to be able to provide us that level of education. But I understood when I was going to work every single day that, these young children, that was me when I
Yeah.
was growing up, in a very low income neighborhood and not having certain access to resources. And for me to be a part of the solution rather than just focusing on the problem was the way that I wanted to go.
Yeah. You got the bug. You saw what your purpose was. It seems like I can feel that energy right
Yeah,
now.
and it's like to understand the level of impact that you can have with
Yeah.
with sweat equity, and that was the best form of equity that I could experience. I was just a college student, trying to find myself. And then in 2009, I went to Rwanda, and I went on an international development course. I was a pre-med student. When you're a Middle Eastern, child of immigrants, you can only be three things. You can be a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. That's it. That's it. There's nothing else, right?
That's true.
And so I was on a pre-med track, and I went to Rwanda, and I set foot on this beautiful country, on this beautiful continent, and everything that anyone ever told me about Africa was absolutely incorrect.
What did they tell you about Africa? Or what were your preconceptions about Africa?
My preconceptions, unfortunately, were that they are all in a dire circumstance and situation and always in need, when in fact they were one of the most innovative, intelligent, warm, and gracious people that I had ever met in my life. Yes, are there different circumstances in different places around the world? Absolutely. I'm not. I'm not blind to that whatsoever. But to understand what they're going through was to understand the people. And again, I'm a people person. I
Yeah.
love people, and so I was, trying to understand where they were coming from and learn from them and listen to them. And that's when what truly opened up my eyes of what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Amazing. So this is 2009.
Yeah.
You're like, I got my mission. I'm
Yeah.
ready to rock and roll. Then what happens?
So I tell this to people all the time that Afghanistan was the country that gave me life, but Rwanda is the country that gave me purpose.
Oh, cool.
And so that mission that you're speaking of, I try to reenact that every single day, to ground myself and understand that what I'm doing is purpose driven. And once I lose that, then I've lost everything. So I hold on to it very dearly. I'm very, very serious about it. And so when I came back, I spent about a month there. When I came back, I knew that I was going to change the trajectory of my career, but I just didn't know how to do it just
I
yet.
was about to ask you, how'd you tell your dad?
So I graduated from St. Mary's, then we moved to Chicago. So I went to Northwestern University to do a post-baccalaureate in pre-medicine there.
When you say we, are your parents moving with you?
Correct, my
Oh,
family. So my sister was already living in Chicago. She had just gotten married, and California, financially speaking, just wasn't the right place for us anymore. And so we moved out to Illinois in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville. And I was going to Northwestern. I was in the hospital system. I was working for an amazing hospital system out there in the emergency room. So I was,
On your way.
I was on my way to fulfill the dream of my parents of
Yeah.
becoming a doctor. And then one day I told my dad that, this is not what I want to do. And that was a very difficult conversation, to say the least. In fact, it was one of many conversations that I had with him. So then in 2014, during the summer of 2014, the most recent intifada was happening in Gaza. And it was during Ramadan when we were fasting. And I thought to myself, like, what? I got to do something. Like, what can I do? I can't just sit here idle, making some posts here and there. Like, what can I possibly do to support individuals that are going through such difficult circumstances? So I thought to myself, I've worked for a nonprofit. I volunteered at another one before. There's a lot of things that I didn't like about the nonprofit sector, right? And I was always taking notes about pros and cons. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own. That's the only way that I know that I'll be proud of the work and know that the work is being done in the right way. So then I started my first nonprofit called Zamzam Water. And it was intended, and the mission was to build water well projects in communities around the world in need, because water is life, obviously, right? In my biology background and the background that I had of being able to travel to different parts of the world, I understood the importance of access to clean water, right? Something that we take for granted every single day. And so when I started that, I said to myself, one day I'm going to be back in Africa some way, somehow. And that was my route. That was the way that I was going to arrive to this destination.
And so what year is this again?
2014.
2014. And not to flash forward, but how did you find Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I was working for 3 or 4 years within my own organization, and we were building water projects around the world. And we were working on a very large project in Afghanistan, my mother country, in the northern province of Balkh in Mazar Sharif. And what I wanted to do was build a project for 5,000 IDPs, internally displaced peoples, basically refugees of their own country that had nothing, literally. And we were going to build a huge water system for them. So it's a very large budget. Then one day I get this contribution within my organization, and it was flagged by the financial platform that we were using at the time. I won't name any names of who it was, but it was a very large amount. And they flagged it because of the amount, as well as the IP address of where the contribution came from, which was in Macedonia. So for whatever reason, they felt that there was potential fraud or money laundering or whatever it may be. The financial platform, in order for it to go through, required me to reach out to this potential donor. You can imagine how uncomfortable this was for me. To get a contribution is so difficult, a donation from somebody, let alone
Totally.
to have to go back and say, hey, person, thanks so much. is there another form of payment that you can make? And this is exactly what I said to the person on the other side. And they responded to me immediately with one line: "Do you accept Bitcoin?" And this is spring of 2017. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what is Bitcoin? I had no idea, bro, what it was. So, as anyone else would, I went onto Google and I Googled it. What is Bitcoin? And as you can imagine, so many different things came up, bioterrorism, the Silk Road, money
Yeah.
laundering, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm this young Muslim American from Afghanistan. I'm traveling to all these conflict areas, to Palestine and Afghanistan, Pakistan, all this kind of stuff. Like, do I really want to get involved in this funny internet money that could potentially have a negative association with it? But the cool thing, the most beneficial thing here was that every question that I had, I would ask this person on the other side, and they would respond to me with answers. And I'm like, oh my God, this makes sense. Well, what about this? They would respond to me, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, why are people not using this even more? And the person on the other side happened to be Ray Yusuf.
Oh, no way.
And Ray Yusuf is the founder and CEO of Paxful, which is a peer-to-peer global marketplace. And, talking to him and kind of learning from him, I was orange pilled over email, literally. And I have the screenshot of the email in my office, because it's like that was the very beginning. That was the genesis of my introduction into Bitcoin and my relationship with Ray, who I consider a brother now. And we got to talking, and he was telling me, I've always had this dream. I have this dream to build schools. Education is very important to me. I want to build schools around the world using Bitcoin. Can you help me with this? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do this, man. And so Ray's story is very interesting as well, too. He is originally from Egypt. He was born there around the age of 2. He moved to New York with his family to Hell's Kitchen and, grew up in New York in the 80s. And, he was an individual that took pride in being on the ground for a lot of things, similar to the way that I worked. So there's a lot of synergy there. During the Arab Spring, and I believe in 2011, Ray was there in Tahrir Square, and trying to understand what the financial problem around the world was. During Katrina, he went to New Orleans. All the people were trying to leave New Orleans
Yeah.
due to the hurricane, unfortunately. But this guy was going in. He was like on this airplane by himself, going towards New Orleans. It was crazy. But he helped some nuns rebuild a local church and school. And so like physical work, sweat equity that Ray was
amazing.
putting in. So this guy was about this life.
So this is then you guys build and create built with Bitcoin. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah. So that's where it began. And, as we were bouncing off ideas of how we're going to be able to accomplish this, he's like, I want to build with Bitcoin. And we're like, okay, this school will be built with Bitcoin. And they were like, it's very difficult to have the term Bitcoin at that time on a nonprofit. It was very hard to do, let alone give a tax receipt for someone that was donating in Bitcoin. And so, we created the brand. I had the infrastructure layer already there with understanding how to run an NGO, and to be able, the accounting stuff, the compliance thing, like all these back end things. I had already been tested on it, right? And so Ray brings in that Bitcoin catalyst, throwing fuel onto this fire of like, we both have this mission, we both have this passion, and early education is near and dear to my heart. School and education is near and dear to his heart. How can we just package this up with a beautiful orange bow, right? Right? And go from there. And 2017 is when we built our first school together in Rwanda. And since that time, we've built schools in Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, El Salvador. And currently we're working on building schools in Brazil, Ghana, and Indonesia. And our vision is to be able to build 100 schools in 100 different countries by 2030, completely using Bitcoin.
Let's go. So I want to jump into some of the actual stories. When you have some beautiful photos that later today at the Grassroots Bitcoin presentation day, which is day 2 today. We are very thankful for you to be here, and you'll be sharing a lot of those stories with about 100 meetup organizers who've traveled from around the U.S. and from outside the U.S. as well. We were talking yesterday during the panels and discussions, and I think either you were in the audience and you brought this up, but there's like 4 areas of health. Maybe it was a side conversation you and I had that kind of guide whether it's you or the foundation. Can you just elaborate on those areas?
So we have a philosophy within our foundation. We don't just build schools, we build communities. And that community capacity building is a holistic approach that we feel leads to independence of communities, not to be sufficient on a funder, because that's not our model. Our model is to create and foster an environment where folks don't feel as though they need from others constantly. And we focus on 4 pillars within our foundation. It goes with a play on words of being as stable as possible. So these 4 pillars focus on health, but from different areas. The first one is the mental health of communities. The second one is the environmental health. Then we have the physical health. And last, but certainly not least, the financial health. And I think that last pillar is something that many other organizations do not truly focus on. Because when you fix the money problem, you fix a lot of different problems, obviously, right? And so many communities that we work in, they don't have access to natural resources like running water, electricity, sustainable vegetation. So we start at that base layer. That base layer is water, always. Any project that we do, even if we're not building a school in that community, we can always serve the people with access to clean, sustainable water. Once you're able to establish the source of water, you're able to build, both figuratively and literally. The electricity aspect, obviously, for connectivity issues, for them to be able to thrive as well. And then the sustainable vegetation aspect, building farming systems to be able to use the water, to be able to use the irrigation of a pumping system via electricity. That's how we're able to establish the first 3 aspects of it all. Then you get to talk about building infrastructure. The infrastructure layer can come in the form of a school, a technology center, a playground for students, whatever it may be, right? But then the last piece of that puzzle is the financial literacy aspect of all this, where we provide financial literacy and Bitcoin education to communities for free. And the reason why we do this is because many people, including myself, when I first started out learning about Bitcoin, I didn't understand what money was, bro.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what money was supposed to do for us. And the communities that we work in, unfortunately, are disconnected from the financial global system. And they don't truly understand the power of what money is supposed to do for them because they're so isolated, right? And so that education is a level of empowerment. That education doesn't just translate into the students and young children of the community, but also the teachers,
Yeah.
the community members, the parents themselves.
Yeah. Just if I can jump in with a quick story. So, do you know how many, not to put you on the spot, how many countries there are in Africa?
54.
54. Okay. So I've been to, believe it or not, Burkina Faso. Have you ever been to
Yeah,
Burkina?
West Africa,
Yeah,
yes.
West Africa. So
Yeah.
it's like the 5th top 5 poorest of the 54 countries in Africa. So that's saying something.
Yes.
So I went to the capital Ouagadougou, Bobo Dioulasso, and then also a village in Panama. And I think my cousin was working. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but maybe the Peace Corps or one of those areas. Microfinancing, getting money. This was in, I think, 2011, 2010 maybe. Um, I saw how important it was to get money directly to the individual and especially women, because there's always these middle men or middle people that would just take, and then all of a sudden that $1 would be watered down, no pun intended, to like 10 cents, 5 cents, and so on. So putting all these pillars together, and especially that last pillar that you mentioned, the financial side, is extremely important. And especially this peer-to-peer aspect is like, from my experience at least, which is just, again, I'd only 2 weeks in West Africa, spent some time in Egypt, Morocco on the north side, and then in the south at Tanzania as well. Um, Africa is such a dynamic place, similar to the US in terms of different cultures, and equipping them with what you guys are doing, I think can go a long, long way. So I'm really excited to hear about some of these stories.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to just focus on Africa itself, I mean, it is its own world, so to speak.
Um,
You have over 1.5 billion people, and they have different cultures, different languages, different tribes, different, ideologies, but yet we always bundle them up into one, one pot. And that's very unfortunate.
Yep.
Another unfortunate circumstance is many of these countries are not financially communicating with one another, the neighboring country. For example, we're here in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. Imagine not being able to speak to someone in Missouri or Alabama
Mm-hmm.
or Virginia for that matter, and not be able to speak to them financially, right? How difficult would it be for people to do business, to transact? And so that level of financial information and literacy allows folks the opportunity to make mature financial decisions. I'll give you one example. When my father came to this country, in the span of 40 years that he's been here, he's filed for bankruptcy not once but twice.
Wow.
And that's because of a lack of financial literacy. That's because he didn't understand the predatory practices of the banking system and institutions that preyed upon him when he first came to this country. For example, my dad didn't understand APR percentages and interest rates and all these kinds of things. So he said, oh, so this magic plastic card will allow me to be able to support my family by buying this refrigerator today, not having to pay for it right now. And I don't have to pay for it until the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
Heck yeah, I'm going to do this. Oh, this TV, this microwave, right? And so he created a black financial hole for himself. And no one was there to guide him.
Mm-hmm.
No one was there to kind of teach him along the way, even though he would have been willing to want to learn. And I wish that during his time that Bitcoin was there, because my dad, to leave Afghanistan, was smuggled into Pakistan in an empty oil tanker. He wasn't able to bring anything with him.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had Bitcoin, he could have brought his entire wealth with him. He could have brought his entire life savings with him and a flash drive if he wanted to, or here, right?
Yep.
And so when we think about the circumstances that people are dealing with financially today, if we can solve this problem, imagine the abundance that we can have around the world, not just the global south, but even the first world's quote unquote.
Yeah. And not to jump. So there's the dignity of, moving from one culture to another and then starting over again. And maybe dignity isn't the right word, but like that transition, there's so much new, the assimilation into a new culture, especially with the, starting a family and so on. There's so much new stuff going on. The last new thing you want to start not from zero. You want to start from the financial starting point that you've been able to accumulate from that place. So yeah, my stomach churns over when I hear about the predatory practices of these different financial practices or companies that take advantage of these folks. But there's Bitcoin, right? And so
There is.
and now on these 4 pillars, bringing that financial literacy and using one of the common themes, especially over the last 2 days, is Bitcoin. We love Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's a tool.
Mhm.
At the end of the day. And how have you been showcasing that tool amongst? And we'll concentrate on Africa because that's also just we only have a lot of time here. But how have you guys been showcasing the tool of Bitcoin?
Simply put, any community that we go in and they ask us what is Bitcoin, money. You have to simplify things for folks to be able to understand, and that's the way that it was explained to me. And so when they understand what money is and what money is supposed to do, and that they understand that Bitcoin is also money, the projects that we're able to accomplish in these communities is the perfect introduction to what Bitcoin is. Because they're like, oh, this is something that I can't see, I can't touch, I can't feel. How is this real, right? And folks sometimes, many times, are afraid of being scammed. But they're afraid of bad actors trying to play them, which is a valid point, right? So for us, as a tool for them to understand that here's a structure, here's a resource that was provided for this community where Bitcoin was the means of exchange, so to speak. Here's the benefits of being able to use Bitcoin, where if you have a smartphone in your pocket, you don't need to go to the Western Union to collect your money from your family that's sending it as a remittance from overseas. You don't need to spend that 3 hours round trip to go to the local market when you're in such a rural, isolated area. Here is the level of empowerment of individuals that are unbanked to finally be banked, so to speak, and be connected to the financial global system. For them, this level of financial empowerment is something that psychologically just brings them to a place to think about the world being open to them, right? Many of the people that we work with, they never leave their communities. They're always there. So when they see someone like myself or someone coming from the outside coming in, it's something new. It's refreshing for them, right? But there's also a level where we have to understand trust needs to be built. Trust needs to be cultivated. That's something that you cannot buy someone's trust, right? Whether it's 100 Bitcoin or $100 million, it doesn't matter, right? It has to be very genuine and it has to be authentic. And I think when we're talking about philanthropy and charity, those are two different dynamics, right? So we're talking about a tool. The tool of Bitcoin is always the long game. It's always allowing people to think tomorrow and down the line rather than just being concerned about today. And this is a concept that takes time. It's not a perfect way, it's not a perfect route. Our work is not perfect either when we're showing that. But again, we have to start the conversation for these folks.
Totally. So we're looking at this beautiful photo, by the way, on the screen.
Yes,
and
we
that
are.
smile is ear to ear across pretty much every single one of these beautiful kids. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
So this is in our primary school, our second school in Machakos County, Kenya. And these are students of our school. We have about 300 students that go to school every single day. And we have made it.
Can I actually back up for 1 second?
Sure.
Because I'm curious about this. Like, how did you identify this place,
Right.
this school, and how did you even get the opportunity to do this?
Right. So every location that we go to has, it requires me willingly to be able to go and assess and survey the area, to understand the people, to understand the community. And our model is a model that the proprietary asset that we have is the relationship building, right? That's first and foremost, is the willingness to be able to go and hear from the people and learn from them and understand them. So when we go into a specific community, the school systems are on a plot of land. That area of land is donated by the community itself. So this household, that household, the other household, they give a portion of land and we accumulate it in a centralized area within the community. Why do we do this? It brings a level of mutual respect and mutual responsibility between the foundation and the community. There's a level of equity that's given because we know that we're not going to be able to be there every single day. I can't be there all the time. So we want to ensure that this project is protected, that this project is maintained and sustained. So for this specific area, we'll use that as an example. A friend of mine from here in the States, who's Kenyan, said, what about Machakos County? The equivalent of Machakos County is like a state here in the United States. So it's a large area of land, as you can imagine. But this specific area was an example of a place that was willing to want to learn more about what Bitcoin was. The beauty behind Kenya and the people of Africa is that the willingness to want to continue to always learn. They had heard about Bitcoin, didn't know much about it, but they wanted to be a part of something that brought Bitcoin into their community. Now, I will be, very careful when I say this, that we do not force any community that we work in to use Bitcoin. It's all voluntary. We don't force anyone to learn about Bitcoin unless it's voluntary. But when you show firsthand a tangible result of Bitcoin building something, builders in Bitcoin and built with Bitcoin, something that was built with Bitcoin, literally and figuratively, they become curious. They want to understand how, why is it better? Why is it different than regular fiat, than this regular Kenyan shilling, right? And so it's all about creating this level of trust like I was talking about earlier. And so this specific community, when I was spending time there, they understood the impact that education, access to clean water can have. But more importantly, this community is 3 hours away, Rod, from Nairobi, which is the capital city. So extremely desolate area, extremely isolated. So just for us to be able to go from the community to the local market would take you about an hour because the roads are. It's a very you've been on the continent before, so and anywhere around the world, we don't have paved roads everywhere. So many folks here don't have vehicles, they don't have cars. So that means you have to have a bike. If you don't have a bike, you gotta get it from your friend. You may have to pay them to rent the bike from them. Then you have to go to
Or you're walking.
Mainly walking, riding a bike. Some people don't have money for the moto, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So how are you connected to the rest of the community, the surrounding communities? You're not. You're only literally isolated in this one place. So what we're doing with Bitcoin is opening up the world to these individuals, literally.
It's so dang amazing. So, oh man. And why this age of kids? I'm curious.
So if you remember, I talked earlier about preschool and
Yeah.
early
Oh, yeah,
education
that's right.
and how I didn't have the fortunate circumstance to have an early education. So I didn't learn how to read until I was in like second or third grade, and my sister was my teacher. And so understanding that at the core fundamental level of ages 3 to 6 years old, there's a lot of learning that happens there. Children are sponges. And so if they're not in the classroom learning about shapes and numbers and colors and letters, then they're behind, unfortunately. And every one of these children deserves to have an opportunity to succeed. And so many of these children have already gone through our nursery program, are now in primary school. So above the ages of from ages 7 and above. And so if you notice, every photograph that we want to capture is always showing children in a positive state. We never want to show poverty. We are not in this to
That's awesome.
we don't want to show children in a very negative, difficult state because we don't want to exploit and that we do not want to take advantage of their situation. That's not what we're about. And every single child that goes into our school has signed a waiver of when we come for our community engagement events, there will be pictures taken and videos taken. So those waivers are signed by their parents. So when we have a community engagement event, if that mother or father does not want their child to be photographed, then that child doesn't attend the event itself. So it's a very voluntary kind of system that we have where we do not want children that do not want to be photographed to be in our photographs. It has to be a way where, again, that mutual respect and that mutual love needs to be there because we don't want to capture moments just to use them as a tool for fundraising. That's not what we're about. We want to capture the stories of these individuals because stories are much more impactful than those types of photographs.
So, sorry, what year was Built with Bitcoin created again?
2017.
So, 2017, flash forward to today in September of 2022. So, it's been approximately 5 years you've been doing this full time.
Correct.
Full time.
Correct.
Wow. So, you've been doing this for 5 years. You got probably hundreds of stories.
Yeah.
What was one of your other aha moments when you saw maybe one of your children, students, I would better frame, just have an aha moment and you're like, dang, I'm making an impact. And I know you're tearing up a little bit right now, but.
So there's an individual, her name is Immaculate. She has not one, not two, but 5 children that go to our school in Rwanda. And in 2018, when we opened up our second school in Rwanda as a primary school, she provided us with a gift and she wrote a letter for us. And I read it in front of the community. And she said that we are her children's golden chance, right? And the meaning behind this was these schools, through this education, her children are able to have a future. And to be a part of something like that is extremely special. And in doing so, she also gifted us a basket. And when I opened up the basket, there were 2 hens in the basket, living, breathing chickens, basically. And when you unwrap this, a chicken to an individual in that community provides food for weeks, if not months, whether it's through eggs and through the meat of the chicken itself. And for her to gift us not 1, but 2, that means that she was more than willing to take food away from her own family to provide this gesture of appreciation. So
That's amazing.
It's Rod, our work in the communities that we work in, it's not about the number of schools or the number of people that we're affecting.
Yeah.
We care more about the quality of the work and the quality of the relationships that we have. Any community that we work in, when we go back, I recognize their faces, I know their names, I see their children, I see them, and it's further than just donations and work. There is this peer-to-peer relationship building that's happening that is lifelong, it's generational. And to understand that with education, you are building for the future. And that's what Bitcoin is truly about. We are literally building for the future of humanity when it comes down to it. And that's like a macro type of
Yep.
viewpoint and zooming out. And so, like, these children here can one day are going to become journalists. They're going to become police officers, artists, presidents, whatever they want to
Yeah.
become. And Bitcoin was the catalyst that allowed them to be on that journey.
Amazing, man. I mean, you given not to be too cliche or anything like that, but the hope to actually dream and actually be able to fulfill those dreams, and really giving them the tools necessary to, or the tools to able to make those dreams become a reality, which is just amazing. So as we kind of are wrapping up a little bit, I am excited because I'm like got goosebumps. What's in store for 2023
Oh, man.
and beyond?
Yeah. So the Bitcoin community is a beautiful community,
Yeah,
man.
man.
Like, we have the most generous individuals that you can ever imagine that never require appreciation or recognition. And the support that we've gotten over the years has allowed us to continue. We're 100% grassroots funded. And for us, it was important to always be on the ground for folks to be able to see the kind of work that we're accomplishing. Don't trust, verify. That's within the fabric of the work that we do. And we have the boots on the ground type of mentality. That's what Ray has always instilled in me, and
Yeah.
how we work so well together. 2023 and beyond, we want to incorporate mining. I talked to you about this in May within our foundation. We're going to be starting that because we want to be able to have Bitcoin sitting in our treasury over a period of time. We want to hodl Bitcoin, and we're not doing that at the moment. And that's something that I want to do. And
Just because your expenses are dollar denominated?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
And so for us, what we want to do is, even during a bear market, we can still build with that. We have a project, we want to be able to raise funds for that project, and that Bitcoin goes out into the world. We don't want to hold on to it for too long. But I want to change that. I want to create a separate arm to our foundation where we can hodl Bitcoin for between 3 to 5 years. So, because we know where it's going to go to and beyond. And for us to be able to fulfill this vision of building 100 schools around the world, we've built 10 so far, right? So we got 90 to go.
Let's go.
We got 90 to go by 2030. And I truly believe that we'll get there. But it's not just about the schools. It's about the people of our ecosystem. And so for me, we want to continue to amplify through, yourself, Bitcoin Park, and others around the nation and around the world that have supported us, to highlight the work that we're doing and inspire them to want to take part in it. We're planning on Q1 and Q2 of next year to hopefully build 3 schools in 3 different continents at the same exact time, something that we've never done before. That's in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, pinpointing places that have high levels of adoption of Bitcoin so that the school systems themselves become Bitcoin education centers as well. And so we want to kind of foster and incorporate, the Bitcoin education with everything that we do, obviously. But if we can go into specific areas around the world that have Bitcoiners that have already adopted, this allows us to catalyze our work to go even further. And for us, it's my dream and goal in 2023 is to visit as many Bitcoin meetups in the United States and around the world as possible. And that's why I love being here at Grassroots and being able to meet people from dozens and dozens of different meetups around the country. And I would love to go and just sit and learn from them and to be able to speak about the work that we're doing and hopefully make that connection.
Absolutely, man. Well, I know not to speak on their behalf, but many, if not all, have been, and I'll go say all of them are so thankful to meet you, help share your story, invite you to their meetups, and I can see that happening definitely in 2023. So let's leave folks with where they can find you, how they can help.
Yes, so we share a ton of information and content on our Twitter page at Built with BTC. We at Built with Bitcoin on Instagram. We're on Facebook as well too, but Twitter is our biggest vehicle. We're very active on there. We engage with individuals that ask us questions. You can ask any question you like via DM or email us, info@builtwithbitcoin.org. Our website, builtwithbitcoin.org. You can directly donate there. You can do it KYC, non-KYC. We provide tax receipts for folks that are here in the States. Anonymous donations are actually something that I learned from Odell, by the way. For him to talk about security and non-KYC transactions, I was like, you know what? We got to allow non-KYC donations as well, too. And so beyond that, we love to be able to engage and talk with folks. And being able to speak with them peer-to-peer, like here at this event and other events around the country, that's where I take pride in. And having those difficult conversations and difficult questions, it's all good because we have to be as honest and as transparent as we possibly can. And again, I'm extremely, extremely grateful to you, Rod, to Odell, and everyone that invited us here, to giving us the platform to speak about the work that we're doing and showcasing this beautiful use case of Bitcoin by changing and disrupting philanthropy for the better.
Amazing, man. We're going to include all this in the show notes. Please look at the show notes to follow Yusuf and your amazing, amazing Built with Bitcoin Foundation. Thank you again for spending the time with us, man.
My brother, thank you.
Cheers.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Yusuf as much as I did. His work with Built with Bitcoin Foundation to empower children in their communities through education and circular economies is literally changing lives and serves as an inspiration for me and I hope for you as well. If you're enjoying the pod and want to automatically stay up to date, please like and subscribe in your favorite podcasting app and make sure auto download is on. This would also mean the world to me. And feel free to share with some friends. Lastly, come visit us in Nashville at Bitcoin Park. The Bitcoin community here in Nashville grows stronger by the day. We hinted at a number of events, workshops, and meetups. More to come on this, especially in 2023. So if you want to be the first to know, join our meetup page at meetup.com/Bitcoin Park. And check the show notes for this episode for a link to the Bitcoin Park Discord community server so that you can stay connected with us. Until next time.